Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War news update for the 3rd of November 2023, the second part of the news update. Please check out my first one previously if you haven't already seen it. Let's go to the military aid segment where we normally start this video. F-16 fighters are now less useful because the Russian Federation has improved its air defense. I reported on this yesterday widely with regard to an analysis of Zaluzhny's article in The Economist. But just to remind you that F-16s, unless there are particular moves against the Russian air defenses, particular successes against the air defenses so that they are sufficiently degraded, then the F-16s are going to have less utility than previously. Well, speaking of F-16s, in many Russian resources, so this is coming from Russian sources, especially the mill bloggers, there is this kind of information flying around. At least 5 disassembled F-16 fighters have been transported to Ukraine so far in civilian trucks. This is reported by specialized resources, so take that with a pinch of salt. Don't know if that's the case. We've heard about them being or due to be sent to places like Romania so that they can train on them, fly them for training, but we haven't heard about delivery to Ukraine. There's been talk about they won't be in Ukraine until spring next year, or the Ukrainians won't be able to fly them until then, but I guess they're going to get some airframes in there early to maintain them, to make sure they're ready to get to I guess have them in the air bases to have maintenance teams know their way around them. I know they'll be getting training elsewhere, but I'm sure we won't be waiting until the end of spring next year before we see F-16s or before they're taken to Ukraine. The US plans to announce a $425 million military aid package for Ukraine soon. The aid package includes $300 million worth of laser-guided munitions to shoot down Russian drones, but also 155mm and 105mm ammunition and munitions for the NASAMS and HIMARS. So NASAMS are air defense, HIMARS are GMLRS guided multiple launch rockets. Rocket systems, HIMARS. This, I believe, will be part of the already agreed budgets for Ukrainian assistance. So there's this talk about how there's still $5 billion yet to be spent, and I'm a little bit confused. So the way I understand it is that they've still got loads of budget they can eat into to give munitions and assistance to Ukraine. What they're arguing over at the moment is going forward extra budget for Ukraine, and indeed the Biden administration want to give like a year's worth of funding that then they can eke out over the year, but they front load it to the beginning to now before people tire too much and before it becomes a political hot potato, even more of one. You know, they want to get that big budget in now. So these are two separate ideas, and this is military aid that is as a result of previous budgeting. That's how I understand it. I might well be wrong, but obviously the Ukrainians need all that and more, don't they? Ukraine, though, apparently covers 20% of its ammunition needs. So thanks, Ulfbert75 for this. A Defense Express article in Ukrainian. This is Google Translate, so thanks for putting me onto this. So I find this incredibly significant. The production of ammunition is also expanding, the article says. According to the head of the main director at Missile Forces and Artillery and Unmanned Systems, Ukraine currently covers 20% of the need for ammunition on its own and 50% for some types, and these indicators are increasing. Wow. Okay, there's a couple of questions here, which is that providing 20% of what they have now? So say they get 100 units today, 20 of them will come from the Ukrainian production facilities, either in Ukraine or in conjunction with, say, Poland or other manufacturers just outside of Ukraine. Or is that to say, I doubt it's to say that's 20% of their needs. They actually need way more than that. So I presume it's just 20% of what they have at the moment, rather than the need for ammunition. I know that's me splitting hairs, but actually they need like 10 times that much, and they aren't getting 20% of that from their own construction. I wouldn't have thought. Anyway, no less important is the fact that repair units of the armed forces of Ukraine have already mastered the average repair of Western artillery. Moreover, in the event of a shortage of original spare parts, similar spare parts are manufactured by the Ukrainian defense industry. This means a significant reduction in the time it takes for an artillery unit to return to the front. Wow, that's really important. And I wonder about barrels, about whether there's indigenous manufacture of artillery barrels, because that's going to be a significant need for the Ukrainians, as it is indeed for the Russians. Right, a group of Republicans in the US Congress have called for long-range ATACMS to be provided to Ukraine. So now they've got the short-range, older ATACMS missiles. The idea is that they need these longer-ranged unitary warheads, almost certainly, although there's the upgraded cluster variant as well, but it has fewer cluster munitions or submunitions in it. Nonetheless, I presume they are meaning, well, then they might mean the longer range cluster as opposed to the longer range unitary, or both. In a letter to Biden seen by Reuters, Republicans on the Congressional Foreign Relations and Armed Services Committee said they welcome reports that the administration had provided Ukraine with several limited range ATACMS systems, or ATACMS missiles, but asked that he also send more long-range systems. Ukraine's need for deep strike capabilities remains urgent, especially to engage targets throughout Crimea, the congressman as well as senators wrote. These are going to be Republicans who are very interested in supporting Ukraine, who are on the Congressional Foreign Relations and Armed Services committees. So they are going to have the requisite knowledge. You know, I've complained about people who are being very difficult about Ukraine, possibly just not having the requisite knowledge to make those kind of calls, make those decisions, and they're not really on board with assisting Ukraine because they don't know enough about the international ramifications of not assisting Ukraine. I also don't know enough about what the weapons that are being given to Ukraine are, how they are funded, etc., etc., etc. So it's very easy for these people off in the kind of fringe politics to say, no, we're not happy with this, no more aid to Ukraine, whereas you got other Republicans sitting on these important committees going, well, no, you're wrong, and I know you're wrong because, hey, this is the kind of work I do. Germany hands over to Ukraine a new package of military aid. This will be one that's been announced previously, so this is not a new announcement, but I think it's handing over the package, as it says, and this is brilliant. I mean, Germany are doing such a good job at the moment of supporting Ukraine with actual kit. 12 APCs, 2 radars, 7 Promoco 1 drones, 2 anti-missile defense systems, 4 helicopters, 32 SATCOM satellite terminals, 4 HX-81 and 4 semi-trailers, 12 MAN TGS trucks, and 30,000 sets of winter clothes. Great stuff. Keep it coming. Thank you, Germany. Swedish Archer artillery system is finally confirmed. Now, someone was asking me this, or a number of you have been asking me this in the threads recently, and although I haven't answered, I do see these questions and hopefully find an answer to them and then get back to you. Well, here is an answer. Swedish Archer artillery system is finally confirmed to be in Ukraine. Judging by the flag, Archers will be in service with the 45th Brigade of Ukraine. Now, some claims that with the CV-90s, the Swedish infantry fighting vehicles, they are up in the Crimea area and up further to the north. And there was some claims that some of the I'd heard that Archers were, and I can't remember whether it is Bakhmut or Avdiivka, but certainly either in the east or the northeast, rather than down on the southern front line. But I don't know. I'd have to look into where the 45th Brigade is. But yeah, we are seeing that Archers are there, which is great. These have some of the longest range, and they've got a really high fire rate as well. I mean, really good bits of kit that can shoot and scoot. Here we have Ukrainian electronic warfare system that jams the Russian GLONASS is ready for mass production, according to Fedorov. The Piranha AVD-360, the complex that creates a protective dome up to 600 meters around itself. Drones or kamikaze drones cannot receive commands or transmit data. They are coming online soon, and that would be super, super useful. This is a sort of thing that Zelensky was talking about yesterday. On that Zaluzhny article, I must say this, and I didn't discuss that in my analysis, and woe is me, because that's actually quite short-sighted. I really should have talked about the fact that it was released at all, right? And in fact, the Ukraine the Latest podcast talked about this. Other analysts have said this as well, and probably some of you on my threads too, which is Zaluzhny's not careless with his words, right? In fact, he's interviewed very rarely, and he is careful with what he says. So when he brings out an article which is freely quoting him, I don't know whether the article was based on him presenting some text to The Economist and then turning that into an article, and then he also brings out like a 4,000 word essay or whatever it was alongside that, telling the world exactly where the Ukrainian military is at the moment, where their strengths and weaknesses are. You're wondering, what the hell are you doing? Like, why are you telling the world all of this information and basically handing Russia a bunch of potentially really sensitive information? So that must have been thought through. One has to be quite careful with what was being said then. First of all, can you take it all at face value and believe everything he's saying? Or is there going to be disinformation being given out essentially to Russia? That is one thing. Or secondarily, if it is true, what is the purpose? What is the intentions of saying those things? Sorry, the doorbell went there, and I have no idea what I'm talking about anymore. Anyway, point is that these are the sorts of things that Ukraine are really, really going to need. Right, moving on. European Investment Bank is allocating 450 million euros for Ukraine's infrastructure recovery. 2 rebuilding projects are expected to receive the first funding tranches of 100 million euros each by the end of 2023, part of the total 450 million euros allocated for such initiatives. I was thinking about this just in terms of money. Right, and this will not be charity. This won't be like, here's 450 million euros just for a laugh. Thank you, we're feeling really generous. It's not charity. So that there will be funds for this allocated for different reasons, and there might well be strings attached, and the EU will get, this is the European Investment Bank. So this is an investment into Ukraine. So there'll be at least as far as I'm concerned, there's an understanding that this isn't just a free lunch. However, it does also make you realize how much money is swirling around the world. When you get these big disasters happen, and it's like, okay, we're going to give all of these billions of euros, billions of pounds, billions of dollars to these issues, you realize, oh goodness me, there is just a lot of money in the world that is stashed away ready for a rainy day. It reminds me of kind of COVID. So before the pandemic in the UK, the government was like all austerity. So we had this austerity for years and years and years since the crash in 2008, and it was all like, right, we're tightening our belts, and literally our government said money doesn't grow on trees. And then the pandemic hit, and it's like, okay, here's like a gazillion pounds, and we're going to pay it to all of our own people who are claiming they're making PPE and stuff, and all these dodgy contracts. I was like, hang on, you literally, like last week you were saying that you got no money, and now there's like gazillions of spondoolies thrown at this issue. Now I know you keep these things in for these emergencies, but they're just, it's the understanding that lubricating the cogs of the government machines and the corporate machines around the world are just huge amounts of dollars. Right. Russian telegrams are reporting that the first batch of Scalpel loitering munitions, which is a smaller budget version of the Lancet, is ready for use in eastern Ukraine. Quote, there are not enough Lancets. That's a fact. We are not competing with Lancet. We just want to deliver the necessary means of destruction to the front. So these are obviously made by a different company than the Zala Lancets and are cheaper, but evidently do, well, the idea is they do the same kind of job, right? It's a problem for the Ukrainians because each one of those is potentially a destroyed tank or self-propelled gun or whatnot. So Russians are still able to build an awful lot of kit. There is, one could be mistaken for thinking that the sanctions have meant that Russia's production facilities have been absolutely buggered. And I think maybe they were in the opening parts of the war where sanctions were really effective, or much more effective than they were later on, where loopholes were found, people were willing to break sanctions, or they were getting microchips from dual purpose places, so on and so forth. And they've got to a position where they've adapted. The Russian economy and the Russian manufacturing industries have adapted to their current situation. A bit like after 2014, where there were a number of sanctions put on Russia, and that kind of hurt after the kind of Crimea annexation and Donbass. That hurt the Russians, but then they learned to live with it and adapt. And in fact, they get to a place where they got to a place where they could do what they wanted to do via other means and ways. This could well be another case of that, where a year and a half into the war, sanctions hurt, and they are still hurting, of course, and their economy is in a very precarious position. But as far as producing stuff, when you've got Iran, when you've got China delivering things through the back door, dual purpose stuff, there will be ways that Russia can manufacture weapons. And we are seeing that. Here's another kind of example or linked bit of news here. A Russian drone manufacturer is opening a factory in Uzbekistan. So a Russian drone manufacturer plans to open a factory in Uzbekistan's Navoy Free Economic Zone, according to Agence France Press yesterday. The company Flysegro claims it only produces drones for agricultural purposes. Yeah, right, whatever. We produce so many agricultural drones that we're having to open another manufacturing facility in Uzbekistan. Not too sure that's what's going on. Anyway, North Korea likely sent missiles as well as shells to Russia. This is from the South Koreans again. So North Korea has likely supplied Russia with various missiles, including short-range ballistic, anti-tank and portable surface-to-air types, in addition to over 1 million artillery shells. There's also this claim that North Korea are closing down embassies around the world to cut costs. They don't have money, they're screwed. And if they are in that kind of position, then one of their ways of getting income, given how heavily sanctioned the entire nation is, one of their ways of getting income is selling as much ammunition and weaponry to Russia as possible. So you can bet your bottom dollar, or you can bet your bottom ruble, that North Korea are selling not only 1 million shells, as we've heard, but also a host of missiles as well. So, at least in the short term, Russia is going to have enough ammunition to be getting on with, and sadly enough, possibly enough missiles to cause Ukraine some serious damage over the next few months. Right, moving on to geopolitical stuff. Here is the House Speaker Mike Johnson. Talked a lot about him over the last week. He's going to introduce a package to Congress that will include funding to help Ukraine and protect its borders. The Speaker said this at a press conference. According to him, combining aid for Ukraine and border protection with Mexico is the right thing to do, as it will help get bipartisan agreement on these issues, which is interesting because that's quite correct, I think. What he's done is he separated out the Ukraine and border aid from the Israel aid. They've rushed through this Israel bill, aid that has been accepted, that's got through the House of Representatives, is now going to the Senate. There's thoughts that the Senate will not accept that because they want it all together in one package. But we'll see, because there is some kind of rationale here. The right-wingers in the US will definitely want border protection, right? That's a real hot button topic. And there's been these claims from some of the MAGA Republicans that, hey, we don't want to be giving X billion dollars to Ukraine when we can be giving X billion dollars to our border to shore up the southern border in America. Now, if they present this bill, which has the Ukrainian assistance together with border money, then that may have a really good chance of going through. Now, I know that was already going to be the case with the $106 billion package. It was still going to have that border stuff in it. But if it's just those two things, and the Israel kind of package is out there and been and gone, which it may not do because of the Senate, and ultimately I think Biden may strike it. I don't know if he can. There's talk about him striking it down. But yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit torn over this. Ideally, just all in one package, just get it done. Stop fart-arsing around. But unfortunately, fart-arsing around is indeed what the House is known for at the moment. Right, we have not recorded any cases of theft of military aid in Ukraine, says the US ambassador to Ukraine, Bridget Brink. According to her, Volodymyr Zelensky, the government and parliament are taking many steps, including investigating the affairs... Oh, my cup of tea's gone. Investigating the affairs of high-ranking officials and members of parliament to combat corruption. She stressed that a third of the embassy staff is focused on monitoring aid. Wow. So a third of the US embassy has been tasked with monitoring aid and make sure whatever is given to Ukraine gets to where it's supposed to go. This is really good for transparency. This is a really good kind of headline for those who are dubious about giving so much aid to Ukraine, given the claims of corruption and these talking points that we keep hearing about. Right. Moldova will stop paying contributions to the CIS and is preparing for withdrawal from the Commonwealth, the press service of the Finance Ministry has said. In July, the Moldovan Parliament voted in favour of the country's withdrawal from the CIS into Parliamentary Assembly, as well as from a number of agreements with the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth of Independent States is an international organisation established in 1991 after the collapse of the USSR. It includes the countries that were formerly part of the Soviet Union. This is huge. This is Moldova saying we don't want to be in a sphere of influence of Russia, and we're formally voting out of it, and we won't pay any contributions to that, and we are moving towards accession to the EU. This is significant and not at all what Russia would want. And it's yet again, like, the question is, would this have happened, or would this have happened so quickly, or happened at all had Russia not invaded Ukraine? Arguably not, or at least certainly not as quickly, and therefore it's just another example of Russia shooting themselves in the foot with this invasion, the most stupid decision, geopolitically speaking, of the last years. Just absolutely nuts. Putin has signed a bill to withdraw ratification of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Putin has also signed a law that abolishes the obligation to notify the Council of Europe about the imposition of martial law in the country. They are just signing things into law that show that they are more isolated than ever, that they are moving towards some kind of dictatorship, really. I mean, they are a dictatorship as far as I'm concerned. I very explicitly now call, in all my articles I write, I call Putin a dictator because I think he is. I'm also considering doing what Zelensky, I didn't mention this yesterday, but again, referring back to Zelensky's article and his essay, well, no, not the article, the essay that he wrote, is very pertinent that he did not capitalize the Russian Federation. And this is something we're seeing more and more. There's this kind of campaign to get people, like Dimitri from War Translated tweeted, like, he's one of us now. There's this move to not capitalize Russian Federation. And we saw that in the transcripts of the speeches made at the UN, I think by Kuleba, sometime back. I reported on that. And the fact that when you look at the transcripts in the official Ukrainian documents, the Russian Federation and Russia is not capitalized. This is a very definite thing they are doing, and I think it's just awesome trolling. I just think it's brilliant, and I'm going to have a word to my editor to see if that's something that I can do as well, actually, and just start writing loads of articles about the Russian Federation just so I can not capitalize the words. Anyway, Ukraine designates Nestle as an international sponsor of war. Ukraine's National Agency on Corruption Prevention, NACP, added Nestle to its list of international sponsors of war. It turns out I can only buy just ciabatta bread. So my kitchen's just full of ciabatta bread. I've boycotted everything else, and fish paste. That's all I eat, fish paste and ciabatta bread, which is interesting as a vegan. Actually, I'm a vegan plus fish, but, you know, health reasons. Right. Although I can lord it over people like morally as well now. So, and talk about it in every conversation. Ukraine's National Agency on Corruption Prevention, NACP, added Nestle to its list of international sponsors of war for its continued business in Russia, the agency's press service announced on November the 2nd. As of 2022, the NACP said that Nestle had 7 factories operating in Russia that employed 7,000 people. The Russian market accounted for around 2% of its global revenue. That's not insignificant given that, that revenue will be absolutely stupendous. Again, these companies, yes, they are providing food, but, Kit Kat, I don't know, is qualifies as one of these necessities for the Russian population to have access to. But anyway, that's the situation. Nestle are a massive conglomerate of different brands, right? So all of these will be sold in Russia, and interestingly, they appear to own these perfumes, and I wonder if that's clothing as well. Do they own Diesel? I didn't know all that. The Body Shop as well. Oh my goodness! Look at all of these Nestle right for boycotting brands. Anyway, you do what you want to do. But that is the Nestle are under a lot of pressure at the moment from the Ukrainians. USA has introduced more sanctions against Russia's war machine. The latest 130 restrictions especially target companies that help to manufacture killer Lancet drones. That goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier with drone manufacturing and how they can still make those. Well, those companies should have been restricted, in my opinion, a year and a half ago. I don't know why it's taking a year and a half to get that far. Right. DTEK, an energy company that operates widely in Ukraine, that's had one of its infrastructure facilities hit. Energy facilities hit in this last week. I reported on that. Anyway, DTEK Energy Company claims $267 million victory in The Hague against Russia over Crimea assets. The good news for them. Whether they'll get that money is another question. The Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague has completely granted a lawsuit filed by DTEK Group, Ukraine's commercial energy operator, against Russia, ordering Russia to pay $267 million for the DTEK assets seized during the occupation of Crimea, the company reported on 2nd of November. So this goes back to 2014. The International Arbitral Tribunal seated in The Hague has ordered Russia to pay $267 million to DTEK in damages for the seizure of the company assets in illegally occupied Crimea. The lawsuit initially filed by DTEK Group in 2017 pertains to Russia's confiscation of assets belonging to DTEK Kremenagio, an energy distribution and supply company following Russia's occupation of Crimea in 2014, so on and so forth. So that's brilliant. Whether Russia will ever come around to actually paying that, I wonder what obligations nations have when it comes to arbitration like this and how it is enforced. So I assume companies say, or countries say in the EU, if they're leveled against an EU country, that may be easier to get that money back. But countries out on their own, or in a different sphere of influence, from The Hague, I guess if you're part of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, or international legislative bodies, if you sign up to that, then I guess you're signing up to, having to pay out in case of findings against you. But yeah, I can't imagine that Russia are going to be forthcoming in that payment. And Latvia has banned cars with Russian license plates from staying in the country after February the 14th, 2024. This has happened in a number of countries in that area, in the Baltics. Exceptions will be made for vehicles crossing the territory of Latvia in transit. It will be valid only once. In this case, a car must be in the country for less than 24 hours. If the law is violated, the Latvian authorities will confiscate the vehicle and, as planned, hand it over to Ukraine. Nice touch. Latvia. Cyprus. Interesting, because Cyprus is one of those countries that's actually doing quite a lot to arguably help the Russians. There's quite a lot of money that goes through Cyprus, Russian money. It's also part of the kind of Greek Cyprus, I think, shipping setup, whereby there's a lot of ghost ships that end up transporting oil and whatnot illegally on behalf of Russia. There are these ships that turn off their transponders, and then they take cargo from one ship and place it on another, and then turn the transponders back on, and then now you've got this oil that seems to have come, or whatever it is, that seems to have come from somewhere, and then that ship goes off and does whatever. Anyway, there's a lot of those ships that have originally come from Greek fleets and possibly Cypriot fleets as well, but I know that definitely there's a lot of Russian money that floats around Cyprus. So Cyprus becomes the 30th country to join the G7 declaration on security guarantees for Ukraine. Quote, "We will continue to strengthen European security together and deepen our bilateral cooperation," says Zelensky. That's really important. Good stuff. Anyway, that's the end of today's second video. Really appreciate all of your support. Thank you to Karen again, Karen Spurnuck, and also Andrew France. Really appreciate you guys supporting everything I do. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.